Rain pelted the windshield as Rowan Fletcher wrestled his clunky old truck down the slick mountain road, his grip tight on the wheel, and his son, Theo, snoring softly in the seat beside him, cradled in a worn blanket. The sharp squeal of tires jerked his attention to the curve ahead. A white luxury car skidded, spinning out across the icy turn like a ballerina about to crash into a wall of trees. Without thinking, Rowan slammed his brakes, veered into the ditch, and threw the truck into park. "Stay here," he said to Theo, already flinging his door open. The luxury car had come to a stop halfway off the road, dangerously tilted at an angle. A woman inside was frozen, her hands gripping the steering wheel, wide eyes staring ahead like she couldn't move. Rowan pounded on her window. "You okay?" She blinked, then nodded, dazed. I think so. Don't move. I'm gonna open your door slowly, all right." He moved fast, bracing the door open and offering his hand. She looked at it like she wasn't sure if she should take it, but then she did. Her fingers were freezing. Her heels sank into the snow. Her coat, though clearly designer, was too thin for the storm. "You're not from around here," he said as he helped her toward his truck. "No," she breathed. "I was heading to a resort. I took a wrong turn." Of course she was. She looked like she belonged in a perfume-ad long black coat, sleek hair pulled back, boots that probably cost more than his truck. "Your car's not going anywhere tonight," he said. "You got signal?" she asked, holding up her dead phone. He shook his head. "No service up here." "Storm knocked it out. Closest help's down in town. I'll take you there." She hesitated, glancing between him and the old truck. Her eyes landed on Theo, who was now awake, watching them with sleepy curiosity. "I'm not a creep," Rowan said deadpan. "I'm a dad, and you're freezing." That did it. She nodded. "Okay." Inside the truck, Theo offered his blanket. "You can have it," he said shyly. The woman smiled. "Thank you, I'm Penelope." "Hi," Theo said. "I'm Theo, and that's my dad. He fixes things." Penelope looked at Rowan with new eyes then. "You're a mechanic, among other things," Rowan said, pulling back onto the road. "Single dad, part-time handyman, full-time budget juggler. You saved my life," she murmured. "I just stopped your car from kissing a pine tree." They rode in silence after that, the heater blowing warm air around them. Penelope's shoulders relaxed a little. Rowan noticed how she kept glancing at Theo, her gaze softening each time. When they pulled into the tiny town of Cedar Ridge, Penelope blinked at the quaintness of it. The diner lights glowed against the snow, and the only inn in town had a lopsided sign and Christmas lights still up. "Not quite the resort you were aiming for," Rowan said. "It's charming," she offered. He helped her inside, explaining the innkeeper was out of rooms. "Looks like the storm stranded half the county." "Great," she muttered. "You can stay at our place. It's not much, but it's warm and it's got hot cocoa," Rowan said before he could talk himself out of it. Penelope turned to him slowly. "Are you sure?" He nodded. "I wouldn't offer if I wasn't." Rowan's house was small, a two-bedroom cabin tucked at the edge of town with a wood-burning stove and a couch that had seen better days. But it smelled like pine and cinnamon, and Theo was already dragging out board games and handing Penelope his favorite mug. "I'll take the couch," Rowan said. "I can sleep on it," Penelope offered. "You can't. It's shaped like a question mark." "I'm used to it," she smiled, tucking her hair behind one ear. "Thank you for all of this." "Don't thank me yet. You haven't tried my cooking." Later, while Theo drifted off in his room, Penelope sat at the kitchen table, sipping cocoa while Rowan flipped grilled cheese sandwiches on the stove. "You live alone with him?" she asked. He nodded. "Since his mom left, he was 2. It's been just us since." She was quiet for a moment. "That's a lot." "Yeah, but he makes it easy." He handed her a plate. "And hey, I get the couch to myself most nights." She laughed, and it was the first real one he'd heard from her. "That laugh," he said. "You don't use it much, do you?" She tilted her head. "You don't know me." "No, I don't," he agreed. "But I know that laugh was real." The storm raged through the night. The next morning, the world outside was buried under snow. Penelope stood near the window, wearing one of Rowan's flannel shirts over her designer dress and sipping fresh coffee. "I'm not going to ask what you do," Rowan said, coming up behind her, "but I'm guessing it doesn't involve power tools or duct tape." She glanced at him, eyes gleaming. "I run a company," he raised a brow. "Like a startup, like a fashion empire," Rowan blinked. Wait. What? She gave a sheepish smile. I'm kind of a millionaire. He stared at her for a long second, then burst out laughing. You're serious? Yes. And you spent the night in my busted cabin drinking hot cocoa and playing Monopoly with my kid. I did. He shook his head. You're insane. Maybe, she said softly. Or maybe I just needed something real, and last night felt more real than any gala or boardroom has in years. Rowan looked at her, then not the expensive clothes, not the money, but really looked. You're not what I expected. Neither are you. By the time the roads cleared 2 days later, Penelope had become part of their daily rhythm, helping Theo build snow forts, laughing at Rowan's sarcastic jokes, making pancakes that somehow turned into a flower fight. And Rowan found himself watching her more than he should have, laughing with his son, humming while she washed dishes, curled up with a blanket like she belonged there. When it was time for her to leave, Theo clung to her. Do you have to go? Penelope knelt in front of him. I do. But maybe I'll come back, promise, he asked. She looked up at Rowan. If your dad lets me. Rowan's heart clenched. He didn't want her to go either, but all he said was, drive safe. He didn't kiss her, didn't ask for her number, didn't try to keep her. Because girls like her didn't stay in towns like his, and he didn't know. She was already falling for him. Rowan didn't expect to see her again. Not because he didn't want to, he did, more than he liked admitting, but because people like Penelope had lives stitched together with dinner reservations and deadlines, not muddy boots and grocery store coupons. So when a sleek black SUV pulled up outside his garage 4 days later, he thought it had to be some city rep needing directions. Then she stepped out. Wearing jeans, a soft blue sweater, and boots clearly meant for walking, not the glossy kind that crumpled in snow, Penelope looked like someone trying to blend in without knowing how much she already stood out. Rowan wiped his hands on a rag and stepped out from under the lifted hood of a pickup. You're not lost this time. No, she said, folding her arms, a nervous edge to her voice. I came back on purpose. Theo peeked out from the office door, eyes lighting up. Penelope, she grinned and bent to hug him, steadying herself as he threw his arms around her waist. Miss me already? We're making a birdhouse, he said. You want to help? Penelope looked at Rowan. I don't want to intrude, he shrugged, brushing a smear of oil off his forearm. You're already here, so she stayed. By evening, the birdhouse was half painted, Theo was asleep on the couch, and Penelope stood by the kitchen sink rinsing paint off her fingers. Rowan leaned against the doorframe, watching her quietly. You didn't have to come back, he said. I know, she replied, wiping her hands dry. But I wanted to. She turned and met his eyes. I wasn't lying the other night about needing something real. Rowan crossed his arms. And you figure that's me, a guy who changes brakes and lives off canned soup. No, she said, stepping closer. I figure it's you because you didn't ask for anything, not even my last name. I figured if you wanted me to know it, you'd tell me, she smiled faintly. Devereaux, he blinked. As in, yeah, that Devereaux. He let out a slow breath. So what now? You start buying up land around here, she tilted her head. I'm not here for business, Rowan, he studied her. Then what are you here for? Penelope hesitated, then said softly, I don't know yet. I just know I felt more at peace drinking cocoa in your kitchen than I have in months. Rowan didn't know what to say to that, so he didn't, but he didn't look away either. The next morning, she showed up again. Not in a fancy car this time, but walking up the gravel path with a bag of groceries in one hand and a thermos in the other. I figured you'd be working, she said, and maybe Theo could use a proper breakfast. Rowan raised an eyebrow. Are you trying to bribe my kid through his stomach? No, she said, I'm bribing you. He let her in. That day blurred into the next and then another. Penelope stayed in town longer than she meant to, stringing together days by helping at the community center, reading to kids at the library, and somehow always finding her way back to Rowan's place by dinner. One afternoon, while Theo was at a friend's house, Rowan came home from a job to find Penelope in his kitchen, sleeves rolled up, attempting to cook something that smelled half-decent. You keep showing up like this, he said, tossing his keys in the bowl by the door. People are going to start talking. Let them, she said, turning from the stove. You've got oil on your face. She stepped close, reaching up with a napkin. He caught her wrist gently. Penelope, her breath hitched. Yeah, I like having you here, he said, but I don't know what you think this is. She didn't pull away. Neither do I, but I know what it's not. It's not fake. He held her gaze. You've got a whole world waiting for you, and maybe I'm tired of it waiting. Maybe I want something else, something that looks like this. Rowan let go of her wrist. I can't promise you anything, I don't have much. Penelope's voice was steady. I'm not asking for much. He didn't kiss her, not yet, but he wanted to. That night, after Theo was tucked in and the last dish was washed, Penelope stood by the door, keys in hand. Are you always this careful? She asked. Rowan leaned against the wall. With people who can disappear overnight? Yeah, Penelope's expression shifted. I'm not planning on disappearing. He stepped closer. Good. Then he opened the door for her. She paused in the threshold, then turned. I'm hosting a charity gala in the city next weekend. I want you to come. Rowan blinked. Me? Yes. Why? Because I want people to see the man I can't stop thinking about. He looked at her, trying to read what was behind her eyes. I don't have a tux. I'll handle it. I don't belong in that world. Neither do I, not anymore. He didn't answer. She kissed his cheek, soft and quick. Then she was gone. And Rowan stood there for a long time, touching the spot where her lips had been, wondering what the hell he'd gotten himself into. The tuxedo arrived in a black garment bag, hand-delivered by a driver who addressed Rowan by name and waited patiently by the porch as Rowan stared at it like it was radioactive. He didn't open it right away. He didn't even touch it. Instead, he stood barefoot on the porch, arms folded, trying to figure out why his stomach felt like someone had tied a knot in it and then sat on it. Theo padded outside in his pajamas, yawning. Is that for you? Rowan nodded slowly. Looks like it. Is it for that party? Yeah, you're gonna go, right? I don't know yet. Theo blinked up at him. But she asked you. She did. Then I think you should. Rowan looked down at his son, whose logic was built on bedtime stories and Lego instructions. And somehow, it made more sense than anything else in his head. He picked up the bag. 2 nights later, he stepped out of the town car at the base of a marble staircase, heart pounding harder than it had the day Theo was born. The building towered above him, all glass and gold trim, lit from within like a palace. He'd never worn cufflinks before. He still wasn't sure he'd put them on right. Inside, chandeliers glowed overhead, and the hum of conversation was threaded with the clink of champagne glasses and the soft strains of live cello music. A valet took his coat before he could hesitate. He spotted her from across the room, standing beneath a cascade of lights in a midnight blue gown that shimmered when she moved. Her hair was swept back, her earrings caught the light, and the moment their eyes met, she smiled slow, deliberate, like she'd been waiting for him to arrive before she could breathe. You clean up well, she said as he approached. I'm just trying not to pass out, she laughed, slipping her arm through his. Walk with me. They moved through the crowd and Rowan nodded awkwardly when people greeted her by name. She introduced him only as Rowan, no titles, no grand explanation, just Rowan, and it meant more than he could say. You're not just being polite, right? He asked as they reached the edge of the ballroom. She turned to him. Is that what you think this is? I don't know what this is. You're the most powerful person in this room, and I'm the guy who replaces brake pads. But you're also the man who pulled me out of a wreck, gave me your couch, and made me feel like I wasn't alone for the first time in a long time. He looked away. You really want me in your world, she nodded. I want you in mine because I don't want to keep living in one without you. Before he could process that, a man strode up, tall and square-shouldered, dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than Rowan's entire kitchen. His eyes flicked over Rowan with practiced dismissal. Penelope, you didn't tell me you'd be bringing anyone, he said coolly. I didn't owe you a memo, Carter, she replied. Rowan stepped back slightly. Should I give you 2 a minute? No, Penelope said firmly. You shouldn't. Carter's smile didn't reach his eyes. I'm surprised you're spending your time with someone so local. Rowan's jaw tightened, but he stayed still. Penelope's voice was calm. You're confusing status with substance again. You always did. Carter gave a short chuckle and walked off, clearly not used to being dismissed. Rowan turned to her. He an ex, unfortunately. He's also one of our investors, which means he thinks he's entitled to my time. Do Do you want to leave? Penelope looked around, then back at him. Only if you'll come somewhere with me. They slipped away from the ballroom, down a corridor lined with artwork and into a rooftop garden that overlooked the city skyline. The air was cold but clean, and the wind tousled her hair just enough to make her look like the woman he'd met on that mountain road. She turned to him. This isn't my life, not really. It's the job, the face I put on for meetings and contracts. But it's not who I am when I'm home. Rowan stepped closer. Where is home for you? I don't know yet, she said, her voice low, but I think it might be wherever you and Theo are. He couldn't speak for a moment. The skyline glittered behind her, but all he saw was the way her eyes didn't flinch when she said it. You're serious, he said finally. I brought you here because I wanted you to see it, all of it, so you'd understand that I'm not hiding anything. Not the money, not the mess. Rowan stepped even closer. You scare the hell out of me, she nodded once. You scare me too. Then he kissed her. It wasn't smooth or practiced. It was raw and real, the kind of kiss that comes from weeks of wanting and never asking. Her hands slid up his chest, his arms wrapped around her waist, and the cold faded into nothing. When they pulled apart, she whispered, I didn't want to leave your place that night. I didn't want you to. So what now? Rowan exhaled slowly. Now we stop pretending this is temporary. She let out a breath that sounded like relief. I don't want temporary. He took her hand. Then let's figure out permanent. The wind carried the scent of late spring pine through the window as Rowan rolled up his sleeves and adjusted the angle of the wooden beam. The community center's new porch was nearly finished, thanks to some ambitious town volunteers and Penelope, who had shown up with catered lunches and a sharp eye for symmetry. You're holding that wrong, she said, stepping onto the ladder beside him. Rowan gave her a side glance. You sure about that? I measured the spacing this morning. You measured my lumber when I wasn't looking, she smiled, brushing a fleck of sawdust from her shoulder. I had time. He tightened the bolt and looked at her. You always got time now, she hesitated, then said, I'm not going back to the city. Rowan blinked. You're not. I made it official yesterday. I handed over the reins of the company. I'll still be involved, but on my terms, remote, less chaos, less pretending. He set down the drill. That's a big move. So was kissing you on a rooftop. They stared at each other, the air between them charged with something quieter, now no longer new or uncertain, but steady. You sure you can handle this town? He asked. I can handle anything as long as I'm not doing it alone. Theo's voice rang out from the side yard. Penelope, I found the box of paints. She turned toward him, her hand brushing Rowan's forearm. Guess I'm on mural duty. Rowan watched her jog down the steps toward his son, her heels traded long ago for worn sneakers, her designer coats replaced with zip-up hoodies and rolled sleeves. She looked more herself now than she ever had in silk and sequins. Later that evening, the three of them sat under the gazebo behind the house, fireflies dancing in the tall grass beyond the fence. Theo was curled up beneath a blanket, half asleep on Penelope's lap, while Rowan added another marshmallow to his skewer. You ever think we'd end up like this? She asked, her voice low. I didn't think you'd even remember our names after that first night. I didn't plan on crashing into a snowbank either. He leaned back in his chair. I'm glad you did. She looked down at Theo, brushing a hand through his hair. He's got your eyes. He's got my stubbornness too. Lucky me. Rowan turned his head toward her. You know what scares me? She waited. You were like a snowstorm, loud, unpredictable, impossible to ignore. And now I can't imagine this place without you in it. Penelope shifted Theo gently, laying his head against a cushion before standing and stepping closer to Rowan. I didn't fall in love with this town, she whispered. I fell in love with the man who built a life inside it. He reached for her hand. I don't have much. You have everything I want. The next morning, Rowan stood in the town square in a suit that wasn't his, but fit like it was made for him. The sunlight filtered through the trees above the courthouse steps, where folding chairs had been set out facing a small arch draped with wildflowers. Penelope walked toward him in a simple ivory dress. No veil, no fanfare, just her, barefoot in the grass. Eyes locked on his like nothing else in the world mattered. Theo stood between them, holding a small pillow with 2 golden rings. Rowan bent down to him. You ready for this, buddy? Theo nodded. I practiced the words. The town mayor, who doubled as a florist and tripled as a justice of the peace, cleared his throat. We all hear. Penelope's hand slid into Rowan's as they turned to face the small gathering of neighbors, friends, and a few curious onlookers, who still couldn't believe the woman now living in the cabin by the ridge once ran billion-dollar campaigns and flew private. I never thought I'd fall for a man who owns exactly one tie, Penelope said when it was her turn. But I did, because I saw how fiercely he loves his son, how he never asks for anything but gives everything. Because when I was stranded and scared and freezing, he didn't see a stranger. He saw a person, and I've never felt more seen since. Rowan cleared his throat. I didn't expect any of this. I didn't expect a city woman to burn pancakes in my kitchen, teach my kid how to tell off playground bullies, or build a life with me one small moment at a time, but you showed up. And you stayed, and I don't know how I did anything before you. Theo handed them the rings, and they slipped them on with hands that had known work, wind, and warmth. You may kiss the bride, the mayor said. He did. And she kissed him back without hesitation, without worry, with both hands in his and a future unfolding behind her eyes. As the small crowd clapped and Theo whooped with glee, Rowan leaned close and whispered, "You still think I held that beam wrong?" Penelope laughed. Yes. But I married you anyway. That night, they danced on the back porch while Theo slept inside, the stars above brighter than any chandelier. They didn't need a honeymoon in Paris or a penthouse suite. They had everything they needed in the cabin by the trees, where their lives had collided and stayed tangled ever since. And when Penelope rested her head on Rowan's shoulder and he pressed a kiss to her hair, neither of them said anything. Because sometimes, the best kind of love doesn't arrive with a grand entrance. It crashes into your life on a curve, changes everything, and never lets go. The morning sun filtered through the gauzy curtains of the cabin's bedroom, painting soft gold across the quilt tangled at the foot of the bed. Penelope stirred first, her hand instinctively reaching for Rowan's, already knowing it would be there. His fingers curled around hers, warm and solid. "Are you awake?" she whispered, not opening her eyes yet. "I am now," Rowan murmured, voice still heavy from sleep. "You always whisper like we've got paparazzi outside," she smiled without looking at him. Force of habit. He shifted onto his side, resting his head on his hand. "You don't have to do that here. Nobody's watching." "Just me. I don't mind being seen by you." They lay in a quiet tangle of limbs and blankets, the kind of stillness that didn't demand anything, the kind that simply was. Then Theo's voice echoed from the hallway. "Are you guys getting up, or should I eat all the waffles myself?" Penelope sat up, pulling her robe from the bedpost. "You made waffles. I made batter. That counts." Rowan chuckled, throwing on a t-shirt. "I'll supervise the waffle chaos." "You coming?" "In a minute." She stayed behind as Rowan left the room, watching from the doorway as he ruffled Theo's hair and launched into a dramatic speech about the sacred art of waffle flipping. It hit her then not like a revelation, but like a truth that had been waiting quietly to be noticed. She belonged here, not because she'd adjusted or compromised or traded anything, but because she'd finally stopped running from herself. Later that day, Rowan pulled her aside near the town's old greenhouse, where wild herbs had overtaken the planters. "I've been thinking," he said, brushing a strand of hair away from her cheek. "You remember that empty lot next to the library, the one with the broken fence?" He nodded. "I want to build something there, something for the kids, a place where they can paint, read, whatever they want, no rules. No limits, just imagination, but I can't do it alone." She leaned into him. "You won't have to." They spent the following week sketching blueprints at the kitchen table, arguing over paint swatches, and dragging Theo into debates over bean bags versus stools. The project took shape quickly, not because they rushed it, but because every step felt like a continuation of something they'd already started the night she crashed into his life. One afternoon, while Penelope was helping a group of kids with mural outlines on the new center's outer wall, Carter showed up without warning. He stood at the edge of the construction site, watching her with unreadable eyes. She didn't flinch. "You're a long way from the city." "I had a meeting in the next town over," he said, hands in his pockets. Thought I'd see what you've been doing. If you're here to talk me out of it, don't waste your breath. He looked around the paint-splattered walls, the barefoot kids with juice boxes, the man in a faded flannel measuring wood planks. You really gave it all up for this? No, she said. I gave it up for me. I never thought you'd settle for something so small. She met his gaze. It's not small to me, it's everything. Carter gave a tight nod and turned without saying more. She watched him leave, not with anger or sadness, but with finality. That chapter was closed. That evening, Rowan found her in the garden behind the cabin, barefoot in the dirt, planting tomatoes with Theo. The boy was covered in smears of soil, laughing as he tried to name each sprout. You're good with him, Rowan said, crouching beside her. She wiped her hands on her jeans. I think he's the one who's good with me. Rowan reached into his pocket, heart suddenly pounding. I wasn't sure when the right time would be, still not. But I figure if I wait for perfect, we'll be old and gray before I get this out. She straightened, brow furrowed, until he pulled out a small velvet box and opened it. Inside wasn't a diamond. It was a ring with a smooth river stone set in a brushed silver band. Simple. Honest. They're kind of beautiful. I don't have a speech, he said, voice quiet. Just this, I want every day with you, even the ones where we argue about paint or forget the grocery list. I want the real stuff, the hard stuff, the laugh until we can't breathe stuff, with you. Penelope's eyes shimmered. Yes, she said before he could even ask. Yes, always. Theo made a loud whooping sound and tackled them both into the dirt. The seasons shifted again, summer melting into crisp air and falling leaves. The community center opened with a celebration that spilled across Main Street. Penelope stood beside Rowan on the new stage, her hand in his. While Theo handed out cupcakes, he decorated himself most with entirely too much frosting. As the town applauded, Rowan leaned in and whispered, You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't taken that wrong turn? She laughed against his shoulder. I think I still would have found you. They danced that night beneath strings of paper lanterns, surrounded by neighbors who'd become family. Penelope's bare feet swayed against the wood floor, and Rowan held her like he'd never let her go. They didn't need a mansion or a private island. They had each other. And for two people who'd spent years chasing different versions of happiness, they'd finally found the version that fit. Years later, the cabin still stood at the edge of town, though it had grown. A second bedroom had become a nursery. The garden had expanded, now full of vegetables and wildflowers. The community center buzzed daily with laughter and paint-stained hands, and on every wall inside their home hung photos of three people who'd built a life from scratch. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the ridge, Rowan sat on the porch swing, Theo's head resting against his arm after a long day of soccer practice. Penelope stepped outside with lemonade, her baby bump visible beneath her cotton dress. She kissed Rowan's temple and settled beside him. You happy? He asked without turning. She rested her head against his shoulder. Completely. They watched the last light fade together, wrapped in silence that didn't need to be filled, because when you've found your forever, words become less important than the life you build between them.